But I'll get this first statement out of the way. This tape is part of the Middle Tennessee Oral History Collection designated as MT 2000.005. This is Betty Rowland. Today is Friday, March 17th, 2000. I'm interviewing Ruth Bowdoin at her home located at 220 Wilson Street, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. The tape of this interview, along with the transcription of the interview, will become part of the MTSU Oral History Collection and will be available to the public. Future researchers may include portions of this interview in their publications. Is that all right with you, Ruth?
Sure.
Okay. Ruth, you were interviewed in our QM Smith collection, our oral history project, but our time did not allow us to talk to you about Classroom on Wheels, and
Right.
you have so graciously allowed me to come back today to talk about Classroom on Wheels with Murfreesboro City Schools, and I'm excited because it's a beautiful story. So I want to thank you for taking time to get those memories down on tape.
Well, I'm honored that you would like to have this.
Well, it's a beautiful story. Will you share with me the story behind Classroom on Wheels? What helped you develop the idea for the program initially?
Well, the feelings which prompted me actually to do it were ingrained in my childhood. For many years I had a wishful feeling about all the poor children in my community, and a wishful feeling then when I became professional and became a teacher. I was always concerned about those children that entered school 1 to 2 full years behind the more privileged children. And this really made me toss at night, many nights. I had wanted to make life easier and a performance greater for that segment of our population that needed us so much and needed a good start in life. Also, I had grown up in South Alabama during the Great Depression. And I had myself felt some effects of deprivation at that time, as well as there was so much discrimination against the African American population there. Some of my friends with whom I played and loved, and these things were hurtful, and they lived with me.
Now, what time period is that, Ruth? Do you mind my asking when you were born?
Of course not. I was born in 1917, and I'm 83 years old at this point, or I soon will be. And if my nomenclature falters and I forget words, I'm going to ask you to provide them for me.
Now, what part of Alabama?
South Alabama, down near Geneva, Alabama. I went to school at Coffee Springs.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, was there a particular incident which prompted you to carry on this dream?
Yes. At this time, I was supervisor and director of curriculum for the Murfreesboro City Schools. And the real awakening for me happened as I observed a master teacher at Bradley School, which was then an all-black school. The master teacher was Myrtle Lord. She was very capable, a very fine teacher. She was trying to make a story, Surprise for Sally.
That was the story?
Yes,
okay.
Meaningful. And it was not successful for her, simply because there was not one single child in the reading group of 11 6-year-olds who knew the meaning of the word surprise.
Really?
They just had an enigmatic look. They had never had a surprise, and besides that, they could not identify with the printed page because there was a white father. Many of these were black children. Well, all these were black children.
The 11.
And a black suit coming into a big fine house with a surprise under his arm. And this is very hard to identify with, and you know, that took me. I said, gee, this is the first time I really realized just how many limited experiences many of our little ones have. And it was a shocking revelation to me. I suppose I had known for a long time that deprivation had left in its wake many bad things.
Mhm.
But I was not able to pinpoint it as dramatically as I did that day, because I immediately went back to some of my courses and thought, yes, language, rich language experiences are increase intelligence, and we know that now. For example, Betty, the latest study I have read, nationally now, the 5-year-olds entering kindergarten speak 3,000 words fluently. That's the average, on average. And I'm sure these children, being 6 years old in first grade with no kindergarten experience, because we didn't have kindergartens at this time, and I realized that we needed to be working on intelligence, because we can increase intelligence. We know that we can do it. We can fill the brain with the richness of language, which interrelates with intelligence. We can do it permanently, but we cannot do it without the parent.
Yeah.
And that came to me, and I decided that I just had to leave the classroom.
Now, what year is this? Ruth,
This was
approximately?
in 69.
In 69.
Mm-hmm, in 69. I had to leave the classroom, and I had to go to my superintendent, because I had such a deep feeling and conviction at that time. It was almost like that something had been revealed to me that I didn't know. I felt that I had to do something. So this took me quickly out of the classroom of Myrtle Lord at Radley into Mr. Hobgood's office, and he had an open door policy.
Well, what took place there?
Well, very interesting. He listened. He was a good listener. He was a fine administrator and a compassionate individual. I had no trouble convincing him of the importance of our doing something to help these children.
Mm-hmm.
He informed me that the State Department of Education had some money, small awards, small amounts of $25,000, that those submitted quality, grants, quality grants might be able to qualify for. And I said, well, let me try. And he approved, and I wrote a project, and with the help of our school psychologist, because he wrote in the evaluation procedures for me, and that was Dr. Rupert Klaus, who was a very fine staff member who aided me in putting this together. And so it was approved, and it was funded for 3 years. And this sent Mr. Hobgood and me to the maintenance parking lot where the buses were parked, because we had in mind a traveling classroom.
Was that your original
school on wheels
idea?
Yes,
A school
it was
on wheels.
Yeah. He spotted a yellow bus with a white top, and the maintenance supervisor, Mr. Walter Lloyd, accompanying us, and I shall never forget it, he found this one with the white top, and he placed his hand on the hood and patted it, and he said, "She's old, but she still purrs like a kitten, and on cold days she turns over without a sputter." And I looked at Mr. Hobgood and I said, "That's it, that's it." It just looked like the perfect beginning.
Did you feel like your dream was coming
Yes,
true?
indeed I did. The Tommy Lytle, the skilled worker on the maintenance crew, began almost immediately. The seats were removed, inside painted and paneled, carpet installed, storage cabinets, bookcases, toy chests built in, a housekeeping center was built into the plan. A movie screen was installed behind the driver's seat. It was wired for lights and heating and air conditioning, and an electrical outlet we put on the back of the bus to carry around with us to the various neighborhoods that we were going to be serving, which we'll get to in a little bit later. But the cutest thing happened. A sign painter came along, and he didn't know me, but he said, "What's happening?" And I said, "We're getting ready for a little classroom on Wheels school to go around into communities." He said, "Would you like to have a Humpty Dumpty, a Porky Pig, or something to distinguish that?" I said, "I would love it." And he took it to his house, and he painted a large Humpty Dumpty, about as tall as, I'd say he must have been 5 feet tall, on the side of the bus, and a Porky Pig on the other side, and a Mother Goose in the exterior, and the Mother Goose had a bell under her arm. And Walter, who helped us select the bus, didn't know I was having it done. It was a surprise. And he was riding behind that bus when we were out the first day, and he said, "Miss Bowdoin, I almost had a wreck." He said, I saw that Porky Pig and that Humpty Dumpty, and I said, "Well, how in the world did that get done?" But that shows you the community spirit that we had and the people that helped us.
Ruth, you sound excited just talking about the bus now. Is it what you envisioned, or was it even more?
It was even more, because it became. It was just not right there, and it was not instantaneous, but instantaneous.
It didn't happen instantly.
It didn't happen instantly. I told you I was 83 years old. But anyway, it was not an instantaneous project. It took planning, and we wanted it to be right.
Did you watch through the development?
I watched through it every day, every single day, yes. And Tommy, what do you think about putting this over here? And you know, he was an engineer.
It sounds like it just became a labor of love.
It was a labor of love. That's actually what it was. And Tommy Lytle is one of the finest persons to put his heart, soul, and body into this. And I will always love him for it.
Well, you were blessed. When did the actual Classroom on Wheels program, when was it able to begin, and what was the service area for the program?
It began in 1969, in the late 60s. And we already had like one small head start here.
In Murfreesboro?
Yeah, in Murfreesboro. The areas served were those considered most deprived. The demographics in this town at that time indicated about 15% minorities, most of whom were our African Americans. And this program was for them. We did not have to, after we got our centers located around and about town. See, we were moving this bus every 2 hours, this Classroom on Wheels every 2 hours to a new location, and we served right in the community. And that was the beautiful part, because we were right there with them, and we could see the parent every day, and the siblings every day that they were when they were at home. We were permitted to enroll anyone 3 or 4 years of age living in a designated community, which was a low-income community, and included the housing projects, and included many of the very poor white housing down near McFadden School. At that time, it was a very poor section there, and we were able to serve those children too.
So you did have white students as well as African American?
Yes, and we had, and I was determined to have an integrated center, and I was able to get 3 or 4 of the white children's parents to agree that they could go to a project if I had them transported by the Office of Economic Opportunity. Helped us with our transportation if a child needed it badly and couldn't get to a center that we tried to provide for them. And so we had cooperation with the Office of Economic Opportunity in that deal.
Wow. Well, now you say you moved the bus every 2 hours?
Right.
Well, now what are the frequencies of the visits? And so a bus, when the bus was there, the children would be served for 2 hours?
Yeah. We were only able to go into a center twice a week, We went Monday and Wednesdays for 2 hours at one center, and then another one for 2 hours, and then another center for 2 hours. We've had 2 hours scheduled, but of course we had to get the bus moving, and we had a little less than 2 hours in the teaching time because we had to account into it the travel time, though we located the centers where they would not have much travel from one center to another. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays we went to 3 more centers for 2 hours.
So and you had 6 centers then?
And then on Friday, I thought we needed visitation day, but Mr. Hopgood felt like that bus should not be. It was so serviceable, he felt, that it should go on Friday also. So we went to some of the centers just on Friday. But the interesting thing is that involving the parents, the Fridays group came out comparable to those that were being served on Tuesdays and Thursdays and on Wednesdays and Fridays. And it's not that the teachers weren't teaching their heart out, but it was that they were able, we were all on the staff able to reach those parents, and they did the work for us. And that's why I believe so much in parenting, in the parenting aspect of this program. Using the child actually as a tool to reach the parent was one of my goals, and I thought of that immediately. In fact, I wrote it into the original program, but I didn't ever dream that it would get to be as large and as important a component as it was. But we know the home far exceeds the school in what it's able to do for children, because the home is where the parent is, and the parent is the child's first and most important teacher. And until we in education, and I don't want to get off on philosophy, but I'm doing it, until we in education can realize that until we reform our homes, our poor homes, those with limited experiences, those without rich language, those with few experiences for their children, those who do not know how to manage in a way that will make children productive and mentally healthy and have good self-esteem, we cannot do it in schools, because we cannot possibly make up the deficit that accrues without some intervening programs. And this I knew when I went into the programs. It's been slow as far as developing nationally, but after it began, it takes 25 to 50 years for an educational idea to take effect.
Really?
Yes. It's a slow procedure. Somehow or other, we in education do not sell our wares. We do not, we're satisfied with the status quo. And this worries me. I want us to be out and about and doing something different and something that we feel will help children. And we must do that.
How long did this program operate?
It operated for 30 years, which I said, glory, hallelujah. Because there were times when, of course, this was city funded after we could not use federal funds anymore after we had used them for 3 years. There was a law against it. Therefore, we could not use Title I funds for it. A new place could begin it with Title I funds, but we could not, because we had already used the federal ESEA. I didn't tell you, did I, that this was written under the Elementary Secondary Education Act, ESEA, Title III, for Innovation and Change. I probably mentioned that. But
so you could operate for 3 years under that, and then the city picked it up.
And then the city picked it up, and the community was the cause of this, because the community we had little money, and they knew it. I did not solicit money. I did not solicit anything. I just told them what our needs were when I had a chance. And the money came in, Sunday school classes, churches,
really?
Community groups, professional groups, civic clubs. They just came to our rescue. and it allowed us to have the money that we needed for enrichment and have the money that we needed for the things that the children needed also.
Well, I was going to ask you about enrichment, but that's under my my umbrella question, I guess.
I'll wait for your answer.
Of describing a typical day for the children at Classroom on Wheels.
For the children. Oh, it's an exciting day, although it's a two-hour program. They bring their coats in, and the greeting starts, and the hugs, and the lap therapy if they need it.
And what is lap therapy?
That's when you pick one up and hold it tight who might feel a little sad at leaving home the first time, and we had very little need for it later. But when we first started, we had a lot of lap therapy. It took 2 teachers and me to keep them happy, because this was traumatic for a 3-year-old who had never been away from home. And we had some interesting experiences with that. But I don't have time to tell them.
Well, I think we could all use a little lap therapy from time to time, couldn't we?
Well, they certainly could, and they did get it, and they were very comfortable in a very short period of time. They had never been, the black children had never been with whites, and I made one mistake without thinking. I sent the black teacher to visit while I was there to work with the other white teacher, and we were at Kittyland, and there were 14 little African American children there, and I thought nothing of it, and I said, Margaret, this was Margaret Willis, I said, Margaret, you go visit now while I'm here to help Mrs. Saylor with the children. And as soon as she said, do you think I should? And I said, of course. And as soon as she walked out of that building, out of that classroom, the children started crying. And I looked at Mrs. Saylor, the other teacher, and she looked at me enigmatically and quizzically, and I didn't know what was going on, and she didn't either. I had never had a child to be afraid of me. I didn't dream, that they were not secure with us. But that was early in the year, about the second week. And I had not given them the time to find out that to know that we were good people and we loved them too, because after all, prejudice is not just one way, it's 2 ways, because with the treatment that many of them have had, their furniture having been possessed, things taken out of their homes that they thought belonged to them, the treatment that has been given to this culture has ignited their feelings. And so I went, when they were crying, it hit me, what happened? I went rushing out and I said, Margaret, come back, come back. She was very, very smart. She was looking out the rear view window. I had told her to take my car so that she could make more visits in the community. And she came turning back. And do you know what? The minute she walked into that room, every tear stopped.
You learned a lesson.
I learned a wonderful lesson. And there was many to learn.
Oh, I'm sure.
But it was a wonderful lesson. And I said, Margaret, I wish you had told me. I said, I noticed that you asked me, but I wish you had told me. She said, Mrs. Bowdoin, I didn't want you to feel that way. She wanted to spare my feelings. And she thought maybe, it would get along, they would get along. But after that, she opened up very well, and I got her advice on a lot of things because I had a lot to learn, and so did our other white teacher.
How many teachers were on the Classroom for Wheels?
Our staff was one. We had, the first year I was insisting on 2 qualified early childhood teachers. And at that time, 2 just fell in my lap. A black one and a white one, both certified in early childhood. And that couldn't happen again. We're just now getting people certified for early childhood.
And then you were on the bus also?
And I was on the bus all that I could be on, because I worked out with the parents a lot, and then I worked the meetings, and I did some public work also. But anyhow, I don't mean for any other firm, but I'm talking about selling our program.
Right.
He who hollers down the well, the things he has to sell will never get as many dollars as he who climbs the tree and hollers.
Oh.
Somebody said that to me once, and I kept thinking, if I climb the tree and holler enough about early childhood and parenting, we're going to make this deal.
You spent a lot of time in trees, didn't you?
I did.
Well, when the children were there and they've had their lap therapy, what was their day like?
Immediately they had their greetings and a little love lap, a little love, hug, and then their coats were off, and they immediately started their free play activities. We had the housekeeping center, which they loved in the back. They cooked. The boys put on aprons and had a good time feeding the dolls, and they rocked the babies, and they gave them names, and to talk together. They talked very little because their language was just one word or maybe two, maybe verb, subject. And one of us tried to be with them at this crucial time because we wanted to interact with their play and come out with some rich language, because they're right at the time when language needs to be there. Between the ages of 2 and 4 are the most important. And we were busy talking to them. They were busy playing. Some had floor things on the floor, like building blocks and creative toys and other things that they would do stories with, or load their trucks. And the teacher would come and say, "My, what a heavy load you have today. Where are you going with this? What were you going to do?" Precipitating language and answering their questions. So we did work during that period. But at that same time, we packed book satchels, because we had little tote bags, and they had to be packed, and we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the tote bags and your lending libraries. I read about those.
But let us go back to the day.
Okay.
After the 30 minutes, I didn't finish. After
Okay.
30 minutes, we had structured activities designed for language development, because we knew we needed rich language. And we had first a quiet activities such as stories and puppets, and then we would have a movement activity such as singing or finger plays, things that require movement, and so that they would not sit more than 5 minutes, and we would change activities often. So in order to do so, we utilized the educational aid, which by that time we had one teacher and one educational aid on each bus, because they gave us another bus after the first year.
Oh, okay.
So I felt real pleased with that. We had 2 buses moving into the communities, and we could serve more children. But the teachers took their turns, because it takes a lot of energy when you are having 15 children and 3-year-olds, and you're not only entertaining them, you're teaching them. And so we moved quickly from one activity to another. One teacher would get her activity ready to go when the other teacher finished. And I called the educational aids teachers too,
Okay.
because they were teachers. And then we would have perceptual and visual activities, such as matching objects on flannel boards. We made each one a little flannel board with little felt objects, and they would find something to go with that, or one that looked alike, or such things as what does not belong. Here's maybe 2 animals and some fruit. What does not belong? That's the higher cognitive things that they were able to learn to do. But we had a variety of things, mostly for language, for free play, for perceptual and visual development. But at the same time, we kept cognizant the enrichment experiences which we could give them later. And not every day would we go out to someplace, but we kept in mind our major thrust, which was to improve their self-esteem, to make them feel important, to make them feel that they could do, to make them feel that they were somebody. And we encouraged them to finish a task they started, because so many start something but will not finish, and that is the I guess the test of the little one. They if they're not really interested, they will not finish their job, and we did want them to pursue their job to the point of finishing so that they could accomplish something that day. And to teach them to love books and love reading. Oh my, what a wonderful book. And isn't Peebo such a fine puppet, you know? Would you like to kiss Peebo? You know, all the little things that we do in a full day's nursery program. We packed into the 2-hour period. And I chose those that I felt were the most important for the goals that we had set up to be achieved. And I think we did a pretty good job with that.
Approximately how many children would you be working with at a time?
At a time? Well, we try to keep it down to 15. We have so many different cultures now and different religions.
Yeah.
It used to just be black and white.
Yeah. So there's such a need for that. I wanted to ask you before I go, I keep saying I don't want to take up too much of your time, but you shared this with me. I know that in the Classroom on Wheels pamphlet, which I'm going to put in with this interview, it talks about assessment, but you shared this chart with me, and I'd like for you to tell me about that again, if you don't mind.
The chart was made because U.S. News and World Report wrote us, and they wanted to know of our school population and how it had changed after we initiated the Classroom on Wheels. So 5 years after the Classroom on Wheels was in progress, we had the scores of the first grade teachers, no kindergartens then. And they wanted to know how our system had changed. And this was task given by first grade teachers in the school system, and it was the Metropolitan Readiness Test. It compares the scores, the school total scores on readiness for all of the first grades that entered school that year. And I'm sorry, I don't know how many, but there were 600 or 700 before the program. And this rates superior, high normal, average, low normal, and low. Before we started our program, only 10% in the city tested superior. After the program was in effect for 5 years, our scores were 26 superior.
26% superior.
Now, I'll have to quickly say that other things, I'm sure, intervened. There were other variables, not just our program, but at least we had a good program and we reached a lot of children, so it's bound to have had a good bit of effect. The high normal before the program were 20%, and it doubled to 40%. And that looks very good on the chart when you can see the superior and high normal doubling and more than doubling. The average are about the same, which is good. 26 and 25% were average both times. And before our program, our low scores in Murfreesboro were 35% of the entering first graders. Remember, we had no kindergarten then either, after 5 years.
Right.
And this went down to the normal were only 8%. Low normal were only 8% from the 35%. And the low were, before the program, 9% made low, and the low almost disintegrated. It went to 1%. So it's a pretty picture. And the city council listened to this when they were debating whether or not they were going to refund the program. And after they saw what we had done, they voted overwhelmingly to refund the program and keep it moving. There was a segment that thought that the city should not keep the program because they felt the federal government should do it. But the federal government had already done their part, and we were supposed to do the rest. and thank goodness we did for 30 years. It changed in the last 2 years. They moved the 2 buses and made them stationary. They didn't keep them in the... I was very unhappy about it because you miss so much in the community. You can see the parents, you can give them their materials, you can talk to them a few minutes, you can pat them on the back, you can tell them how pleased you were to see them at the meeting. And there's so many things you can do that are good things to be done that you can't do when they're bringing them to the bus. So one bus was stationary at Hobgood and the other bus stationary at Bradley, because they were the 2 schools having more of the low-income children. But it changed the character of the program. And the next year, there was room in the schools. So that was why it stopped, the 30 years. But I was glad it didn't make the 30 years. It stopped that year, and they were kind enough, the Board of Education was kind enough to name because they had named the bus the school on wheels, the Ruth Bowdoin School on Wheels, when I retired, and I appreciated it, and I didn't want them to feel that they had any obligation to keep that name and destroy the buses, you know. So I certainly was surprised when they decided that the preschool programs would carry the name. So the preschool programs, which they're now having in each school, I believe, has one. There are 8, some in churches here, sponsored by the federal government for low-income children. They're not having time to work with parents. They're having a little time, but not much. And the parent is the thrust. The parent is the one who can carry on this many hours that they're together, that they aren't in school. By the time they reach the 6th grade, they have spent only 93% of their time, 7% of the time in school, and 93% of the time at home or in the community. And when a child goes to kindergarten, to 1st grade, he will have spent more total hours in the home than time spent with all teachers, inclusively K through 12.
Really? I hadn't thought about that.
And that is something that time needs to be taken in a very constructive way. We didn't mention their experiences, and the experiences that we gave the children were so beautiful. That
the enrichment experiences? Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that.
Well, one thing, they got to come to my house every year and with Santa Claus and gifts, and furniture moved back, and a big tree here, and they could go upstairs, and I put up card tables. For 8 years that I was director of the program, they came here 4 parties. It took 4 parties for the 200 children. We had about 200 then. But they got to ride the bus, and they got to come into my community, and they were very secure and happy to come. That was one experience. They went to the fire station. They went to the police hall. They went to John and Pauline Blankenship's farm and held the bottle for the baby to get its milk. One of the baby sheep. They saw John shearing a sheep, and they had wonderful experiences riding the hay wagon. They went to the airport. They went to a restaurant. They had never been in a restaurant, and one of my Sunday school groups said they'd like to treat them to the restaurant. And so they got to sit on the stools. We went, I guess, to McDonald's or somewhere, I've forgotten. But I have beautiful pictures of a lot of the slides that I took of the children. So all of the experiences they had, they wrote their mothers a letter at Valentine and went to the post office and mailed them and put the stamp on. And so we were able to give them, because the community supported the money for
so that came from
our paying the bus.
That came from businesses, churches, individuals.
Right.
That's,
well,
you said you didn't want to talk about this a lot, but I have to ask you about it. The Bowdoin method, the parent education course, this left just Murfreesboro and became so much more. These videos you're setting here, can you just tell me quickly about them?
I'll quickly say there are two kits. One is the one that I did with the Classroom on Wheels on my own time. I used no staff involvement, and that was the reason I could publish. So all the little books that I made for parents, all the work that I did at home for them to have something in their teaching kits to do, the school children colored them. The older school children colored them and made them look as pretty as they could. But the parents met with me, some of the key parents, and I said, select. They are going to only allow 10 of these. You select the ones that you think meant most to you. And don't let anyone see the ones you're selecting. And they selected the ones that they thought meant the most to them. And I used the parents' opinions in selecting what would go in this. And so the book was written already. And it was it's in.
Now, these teaching kits are available now.
They're available from Webster's International at Brentwood. And anyone interested, the telephone number is 373-1723. It's not long distance.
That's a beautiful legacy.
And the other kit is for, they asked me to do it for elementary school, because I worked with the elementary school with their parent program also at the same time. I was doing one for Hopgood the very last year that I worked. But it's been a joy. I mean, I can't explain my feelings. I guess I would say it's the most joyful thing that I ever did in my life. It was the most self-satisfying experience, though I've had various experiences in the field of education, and I've always enjoyed every one of them, especially children. I enjoy the children. But with the Classroom on Wheels, I think that I can say it was the zenith, because the results were good. The IQs were raised 18 points. The language, 18 or 19 points. They're being very interrelated. The parents' beliefs and practices showed growth. Comments from parents, and one of the most exciting things I did was, like, I went into a project, knocked on a door. I was visiting in this project. And they always say, come in, the doors are open. And I went in, and there was this mother sitting. And I had said, remember, your baby needs to be read to also. She had her baby in her arms. She had her child that was in Head Start then at her feet sitting. And she had her little one that was in the Classroom on Wheels on her side. And she had the book so they could all see it, and she was reading it to him. And I went in and I said, I've caught you. How wonderful, how wonderful. Wait and let me get your picture. And I was able to get her picture doing with her 3 children. I had been encouraging them to start with babies in reading, because we know that we've got to start probably before birth. But I was getting a little bit from them, and I believe that they're carrying on. Those that were touched and those that went through the program were carried on. And I feel that I maybe have done something out of the human spirit that had never been done.
Well, you said when you started that you tossed and turned.
I did.
Over the need for this, and I bet you can lay down and and sleep good now.
I wish that every child could have it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story, and I have stayed so long, but I cannot thank you enough for sharing this.
Well, I was going to go by this, and I was going to not deviate, and I can't do it.
Well,
I don't know how.
the things that you deviate and tell are the things that are coming from your heart, and that's what's made it such a beautiful story. And I just appreciate so much you letting us put this on tape.
And you can have this.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to include the Classroom on Wheels booklet with this
And you won't have to
interview.
send it to city school for it.